Chapter VII. Joseph Smith and the Restoration. Stand fast, ye saints of God, hold on a little while longer, and the storm of life will be past, and you will be rewarded by that God whose servants ye are, and who will duly appreciate all your toils and afflictions for Christ's sake and the Gospel's. TPJS, page 185. The faithful and valiant Christian reformers laid the foundation for the restoration of the Gospel. With the restoration of the priesthood came revelation, additional scripture and all of the gifts and powers of the Gospel. God needed a very special and faithful people. Foremost among them was Joseph Smith. Those who are acquainted with the life of Joseph Smith are familiar with the trials and opposition which he constantly endured. The intriguing story of his life illustrates the loyalty of the prophet to principle, and it also exposed the disloyalty of many others. Joseph Smith lived and died as many of the prophets of God have done. He was favored by the Lord as a chosen and special witness of him. Joseph's life reads like a legend, for he was a man's man and a hero's hero. Whatever men's conception or description of a prophet may be, the life of Joseph Smith would exceed their expectations. Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord, has done more, save Jesus only, for the salvation of men in this world than any other man that ever lived in it. In the short space of 20 years, he has brought forth the Book of Mormon, which he translated by the gift and power of God, and has been the means of publishing it on 2 continents, has sent the fullness of the everlasting gospel, which it contained, to the 4 quarters of the earth, has brought forth the revelations and commandments which compose this book of doctrine and covenants, and many other wise documents and instructions for the benefit of the children of men, gathered many thousands of the latter-day saints, founded a great city, and left a fame and name that cannot be slain. He lived great, and he died great in the eyes of God and his people, and like most of the Lord's anointed in ancient times, has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood, and so has his brother Hiram. In life they were not divided, and in death they were not separated. D&C 135:3. All the prophets of God received the heritage of persecution, and Joseph Smith was no exception. He was only 14 years of age when the clouds of persecution gathered in upon him, but from his youth till the day of his martyrdom, he never compromised with his enemies. He relates, "I soon found, however, that my telling the story had excited a great deal of prejudice against me among professors of religion, and was the cause of great persecution, which continued to increase, and though I was an obscure boy, only between 14 and 15 years of age, and my circumstances in life, such as to make a boy of no consequence in the world, yet men of high standing would take notice sufficient to excite the public mind against me, and create a bitter persecution, and this was common among all the sects, all united to persecute me." History of Joseph Smith, Lucy Mack Smith, page 72-73. Joseph's mother noted that it seemed as though something was always taking place to jeopardize his life. On one occasion someone shot at him and the bullet narrowly missed his head. In the first year the church was organized, Joseph was awakened at night to find himself going out of the door in the hands of about a dozen men. They beat and scratched him, and then tarred and feathered him. The rest of the night was spent in cleaning the tar from his body and dressing his wounds. He was a constant victim of vicious mobs and persecutors. Over 40 times he was brought to court to face some false charge. On one occasion in Missouri a mob gathered with the intention of killing him. The leader swore with an oath that Joseph would be killed or else he would die, and the Lord honored the oath. Joseph wrote, "The tempest of an immediate conflict seemed to be checked, and the Jackson mob, to the number of about 15, with Samuel C. Owens and James Campbell at their head, started for Independence, Jackson County, to raise an army sufficient to meet me before I could get into Clay County." Campbell swore, as he adjusted his pistols in his holsters, "The eagles and turkey buzzards shall eat my flesh, if I do not fix Joe Smith and his army, so that their skins will not hold shucks, before 2 days are past." They went to the ferry and undertook to cross the Missouri River after dusk, and the angel of God saw fit to sink the boat about the middle of the river, and 7 out of 12 that attempted to cross were drowned. Thus, suddenly and justly, went they to their own place. Campbell was among the missing. He floated down the river some 4 or 5 miles, and lodged upon a pile of driftwood, where the eagles, buzzards, ravens, crows, and wild animals ate his flesh from his bones, to fulfill his own words, and left him a horrible example of God's vengeance. DHC 2:99-100. At another time some Mobocrats made a similar oath, which history proves went unfulfilled. However, they were so sincere in their intent to kill the prophet, they would have been willing to die in the attempt. This day a company of about 50 men in Davies County swore that they would never eat or drink until they had murdered Joe Smith. Their captain, William Bowman, swore, in the presence of Theodore Turley, that he would never eat or drink, after he had seen Joe Smith, until he had murdered him. DHC 3:306. Right bracket in November of 1838, Joseph was sent to a prison dungeon in Liberty County, Missouri. For nearly half a year Joseph and his companions were confined to this horrible, smelly dungeon where even the food was very coarse, and so filthy that we could not eat it until we were driven to it by hunger. In such a condition Joseph wrote, "Know assuredly, dear brethren, that it is for the testimony of Jesus that we are in bonds and in prison." Months later Joseph wrote another letter, which contained the same spirit and feelings in the epistles of Apostle Paul. Being in prison, he explained the reason why. To the Church of Latter-day Saints Your humble servant, Joseph Smith, June, prisoner for the Lord Jesus Christ's sake, and for the saints, taken and held by the power of mobocracy, under the exterminating reign of His Excellency, the Governor, Lilburn W. Boggs, in company with his fellow prisoners and beloved brethren, Caleb Baldwin, Lyman White, Hiram Smith, and Alexander McRae, send unto you all greeting. For inasmuch as we know that the most of you are well acquainted with the wrongs and the high-handed injustice and cruelty that are practiced upon us, whereas we have been taken prisoners charged falsely with every kind of evil, and thrown into prison, enclosed with strong walls, surrounded with a strong guard, who continually watch day and night as indefatigable as the devil does in tempting and laying snares for the people of God. And now, beloved brethren, we say unto you, that inasmuch as God hath said that he would have a tried people, that he would purge them as gold, now we think that this time he has chosen his own crucible, wherein we have been tried, and we think if we get through with any degree of safety, and shall have kept the faith, that it will be a sign to this generation altogether sufficient to leave them without excuse, and we think also, it will be a trial of our faith equal to that of Abraham, and that the ancients will not have whereof to boast over us in the day of judgment, as being called to pass through heavier afflictions, that we may hold an even weight in the balance with them. Our respects and love and fellowship to all the virtuous saints. We are your brethren and fellow sufferers, and prisoners of Jesus Christ for the Gospel's sake, and for the hope of glory which is in us. Amen. DHC 3:289, 290, 294, 298. Not unlike the ancient apostles and prophets, Joseph and his brethren lived in the most trying of circumstances, and under the diabolical threats of their enemies. While in Liberty Jail, Alexander McRae described a mob that surrounded the prison. The scene that followed this defies description. I should judge, from the number, that all the town, and many from the country, gathered round the jail, and every mode of torture and death that the imagination could fancy, was proposed for us, such as blowing up the jail, taking us out and whipping us to death, shooting us, burning us to death, tearing us to pieces with horses, etc. But they were so divided among themselves that they could not carry out any of their plans, and we escaped unhurt. DHC 3:258. It was at the Liberty Jail that the Lord gave a revelation for the saints to expect and be willing to withstand these terrible forces of evil. The Lord reassured them that, if thou art called to pass through tribulations, if thou art in perils among false brethren, if thou art in perils among robbers, if thou art in perils by land or by sea, if thou art accused with all manner of false accusations, if thine enemies fall upon thee, if they tear thee from the society of thy father and mother and brethren and sisters, and if with a drawn sword thine enemies tear thee from the bosom of thy wife, and of thine offspring, and thou be dragged to prison, and thine enemies prowl around thee like wolves for the blood of the Lamb, and if thou shouldst be cast into the pit, or into the hands of murderers, and the sentence of death passed upon thee, and above all, if the very jaws of hell shall gape open the mouth wide after thee, know thou, my son, that all these things shall give thee experience, and shall be for thy good. The Son of Man hath descended below them all, art thou greater than he? TEJS, page 143, also D&C 122:5-8. In December of 1842 Joseph was again arrested and sent to jail. He was accused of being an accessory to the murder of Governor L.W. Boggs of Missouri. Joseph was forced to remain in jail for nearly a month before he was released. The prophet Joseph expected such persecutions and warned the saints that they should expect the same. Those who cannot endure persecution, and stand in the day of affliction, cannot stand in the day when the Son of God shall burst the veil, and appear in all the glory of his Father, with all the holy angels. TPJS, page 42. Now, dear brethren, if any men ever had reason to claim this promise, we are the men, for we know that the world not only hate us, but they speak all manner of evil of us falsely, for no other reason than that we have been endeavoring to teach the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. TPJS, page 124. He that will war the true Christian warfare against the corruptions of these last days, will have wicked men and angels of devils, and all the infernal powers of darkness continually arrayed against him. When wicked and corrupt men oppose, it is a criterion to judge if a man is warring the Christian warfare. When all men speak evil of you falsely, blessed are ye. TPJS, page 259. It is a shame to the saints to talk of chastisements and transgressions, when all the saints before them, prophets and apostles, have had to come up through great tribulation. TPJS, page 261. It was in the doctrinal teachings of the prophet that we learn that the eternal warfare between light and darkness, between the righteous and the wicked, would not cease until the end of time. The Lord confirmed this in revelations to the saints. The disciples of Christ could expect persecution or opposition by the wicked. For verily I say unto you, blessed is he that keepeth my commandments, whether in life or in death, and he that is faithful in tribulation, the reward of the same is greater in the kingdom of heaven. Ye cannot behold with your natural eyes, for the present time, the design of your God concerning those things which shall come hereafter, and the glory which shall follow after much tribulation. For after much tribulation come the blessings. D&C 58:2-4. And all they who suffer persecution for my name, and endure in faith, though they are called to lay down their lives for my sake, yet shall they partake of all this glory. Wherefore, fear not even unto death, for in this world your joy is not full, but in me your joy is full. Therefore, care not for the body, neither the life of the body, but care for the soul, and for the life of the soul. D&C 101:35-37. When the doctrine of plural marriage was introduced to Joseph and others, the prophet knew he could make no compromise, nor stop teaching and urging others to practice it. Said he, if I do teach it, and practice it, and urge it, they say they will kill me, and I know they will. But we have got to observe it. It is an eternal principle and was given by way of commandment, and not by way of instruction. Cont. 5:259. Joseph was aware of losing his children and some of his wives, and eventually losing his own life because of this principle. But he continued to teach it, practice it, and urge it upon others. He also knew that this principle would cause mobs to confiscate the temple, and all the work for the living and dead would cease, just as Woodruff was shown that it would also happen in his day. But Joseph Smith refused to make any kind of manifesto that might hinder the practice of that principle. The prophet realized that this principle would cause the saints to lose the city of Nauvoo, many would apostatize, and the saints would be driven into the wilderness. In spite of all the calamities that would result because of the doctrine of plural marriage, the prophet never made any compromise or concession to alleviate those troubles. Joseph knew that his persecutors would become more numerous and powerful until he would be killed. He prophesied that he would never become 40 years of age. In the spring of 1844 a bitter and murderous spirit prevailed in and around Nauvoo. The wicked were seeking for an opportunity to take the life of the prophet. They finally resolved to form an organization or secret combination dedicated to that foul deed. A secret meeting was held at the home of William Law. All of those who were sympathetic or might be converted to Joseph's destruction were invited to attend. 2 young boys, Denison Harris and Robert Scott, by chance happened to be invited. The boys told Denison's father and told him about their invitation to the secret meeting, to which he suggested they tell Joseph. At Joseph's request the boys were to attend the meeting. They reported to Joseph all that was said and done, and also of another meeting to be held on the following Sunday. The boys attended and reported again to Joseph. A third meeting was scheduled, but just before going to this meeting, the boys went to Joseph for their final instructions. The prophet spoke to the young men in a very serious mood. He said to them, "This will be your last meeting, this will be the last time that they will admit you into their councils. They will come to some determination. But be sure," he continued, "that you make no covenants, nor enter into any obligations whatever with them. Be strictly reserved, and make no promise either to conspire against me or any portion of the community. Be silent and do not take any part in their deliberations. See Contributor 5:253. The boys went to the meeting knowing that their lives might be taken. But they reasoned among themselves that they were determined to trust in the Lord and die rather than betray the priesthood. At the meeting the boys heard the leaders declare that Joseph was a fallen prophet, that he was trying to take other men's wives, that he had committed adultery, and that he was leading the people to destruction. Therefore, they declared that Joseph must die. An oath had been prepared which each member of the organization was now required to take. Francis Higby, a justice of the peace, sat at a table in one end of the room and administered the oath to each individual separately, in the following manner. The candidate would step forward to the table, take up a Bible, which had been provided for the purpose, and raise it in his right hand. Whereupon the justice would ask him in a solemn tone, "Are you ready?" And, receiving answer in the affirmative, would continue in a tone and manner that struck awe to the minds of the boys as they listened. "You solemnly swear, before God and all holy angels, and these your brethren by whom you are surrounded, that you will give your life, your liberty, your influence, your all, for the destruction of Joseph Smith and his party, so help you God." The person being sworn would then say, "I do," after which he would lay down the Bible and sign his name to a written copy of the oath in a book that was lying on the table, and it would be legally acknowledged by the justice of the peace. The boys sat gazing upon this scene, wondering how intelligent beings who had once enjoyed the light of truth could have fallen into such depths of wickedness as to be anxious to take such an oath against the prophet of God and his faithful followers. They also felt no little uneasiness concerning their own fate, and almost dreaded the moment when the last one should have taken the oath. At length that portion of the business was accomplished, and about 200 persons had taken the oath. Among that number were 3 women, who were ushered in, closely veiled to prevent being recognized, and required to take the same oath. Besides doing this, they also testified that Joseph and Hiram Smith had endeavored to seduce them, had made the most indecent and wicked proposals to them, and wished them to become their wives. After making affidavit to a series of lies of this kind, they made their exit through a back door. One of the women, whom the boys suspected as being William Law's wife, was crying, and seemed to dislike taking the oath, but did so as one who feared that the greatest bodily injury would surely follow a refusal. After the oath had been administered to all but the 2 boys, Law, Coles and others again commenced their labors to get them to take it, but met the same success as before. Arguments, persuasions, and threats were in turn used to accomplish their desire, but in vain. They exhausted their ingenuity in inventing arguments, lies, and inducements to get the boys to unite with their band. "Have you not heard," said they, "the strong testimony of all present against Joseph Smith? Can a man be a true prophet who would commit adultery? He is a fallen prophet, and is teaching the people doctrines that his own imagination or lustful desires have invented, or else he received that revelation from the devil. He will surely lead the whole church to destruction if his career is not stopped. We can do nothing with him by the law, and for the sake of the church, we deem it our solemn duty to accomplish his destruction and rescue the people from this peril. We are simply combining and conspiring to save the church, and we wish you to join us in our efforts, and share the honors that will be ours. Come, take the oath and all will be well." "Oh, we are too young," they replied, "to understand or meddle with such things, and would rather let others who are older and know more do such work. We came to your meetings because we thought you were our friends and gave us a kind invitation. We did not think there was any harm in it, but if you will allow us to go now we will not trouble any more of your meetings. Joseph Smith has never done us any harm, and we do not feel like injuring him." "Come, boys," said another of the crowd, "do as we have done. You are young, and will not have anything to do in the affair, but we want you should keep it a secret, and act with us, that's all." "No," replied the boys in a firm but cool tone, as they rose to leave, "we cannot take an oath like that against any man who has never done us the least injury." They would gladly have passed out and escaped the trouble they saw brewing for them, but, as they feared, they were not allowed to depart so easily. One of the band exclaimed in a very determined voice, "No, not by a d.d. sight. You know all our plans and arrangements, and we don't propose that you should leave in that style. You've got to take that oath, or you'll never leave here alive." The attention of all was now directed to the 2 boys, and considerable confusion prevailed. A voice in the crowd shouted, "Dead men tell no tales," whereupon a general clamor arose for the boys to take the oath or be killed. Even their pretended friends, Coles and Law, turned against them. "If you do not take that oath," said one of the leading members, in a blood-curdling tone, "we will cut your throats." The looks and conduct of the rest showed plainly that he had spoken. That moment certainly must have been a trying one, but it seemed that fear had suddenly vanished from the bosoms of the two boys, and they coolly but positively again declared that they would not take that oath, nor enter into any other movement against the prophet Joseph. The mob was now enraged, as they thought they were betrayed, and it was with the greatest difficulty that the leaders succeeded in keeping them from falling upon the boys and cutting them to pieces. The leaders, however, were no less determined that the boys should die, but as the house in which the meeting was held stood but a short distance back from the street, they thought it better to be more quiet about it, lest someone might be passing and discover what was going on. Order was at last restored when it was decided to take the boys down into the cellar, where the deed could be more safely accomplished. Accordingly, a guard, with drawn swords and bowie knives, was placed on either side of the boys, while two others, armed with cocked muskets and bayonets, at their backs, brought up the rear, as they were marched off in the direction of the cellar. William and Wilson Law, Austin Coles, and others, accompanied them to the cellar. Before committing the murderous deed, however, they gave the boys one more chance for their lives. One of them said, "Boys, if you will take that oath your lives shall be spared, but you know too much for us to allow you to go free, and if you are still determined to refuse, we will have to shed your blood." But the boys, with most commendable courage, in the very jaws of death, once more rejected the only means that would save their lives. At this juncture, when it seemed that each moment would end the earthly existence of these two noble young men, a voice from someone in the crowd, as if by divine interposition, called out just in time to save their lives. Hold on there. Let's talk this matter over before their blood is shed." And with great difficulty some of the more cautious ones succeeded in quieting those whose anger and excitement prevented them from weighing well what they were on the verge of committing, and considering the consequences that would inevitably follow. Thus the instantaneous death of the boys was prevented, while the crowd retired to the further end of the room and consulted earnestly together, in so low a tone, however, that the boys could not hear what they said. It was evident, however, that they were nearly equally divided in their views of the feasibility of putting the boys to death. Some appeared to be enraged and fully determined to shed their blood, while others were equally resolved to prevent the cruel deed. During the discussion the boys distinctly heard one of them say, "The boys' parents very likely know where they are, and if they do not return home, strong suspicions will be aroused, and they may institute a search that would be very dangerous to us. It is already late, and time that the boys were home." This was a very important consideration, as well as a very unexpected circumstance in favor of the boys. Hope rose high in their breasts as the discussion continued, and one by one of the more excited conspirators was silenced, if not convinced, until at length the tide turned in favor of the boys, and it was decided that they should be released. Contributor 5:254 to 256. On the morning of the 25th of June, 1844, Joseph and Hiram were arrested for treason. They were thrown into the Carthage jail with Richards, Taylor, and Markham, where they were left in the custody of some of the worst enemies of the Mormons. 200 men with painted faces soon rushed to the jail, leaving Joseph and Hiram dead and critically wounding John Taylor. It was upon an oath that Joseph was killed, and soon after the saints took an oath never again to make a compromise with any of the wicked. Messiah Hancock describes what happened. "I saw the prophet and the rest when they departed from Nauvoo for the last time, and I went out to meet their martyred bodies when they were brought from Carthage with Apostle John Taylor, who was himself so badly wounded that he could not stir. Many of the saints went out to meet them, and their hearts were full of sorrow. I went to see those noble martyrs after they were laid out in the mansion. After the people had gone home, my father took me again into the mansion, and told me to place one hand on Joseph's breast, and to raise my other arm, and swear with hand uplifted that I would never make a compromise with any of the sons of hell, which vow I took with a determination to fulfill to the very letter. I took the same vow with Hiram." Autobiography of Messiah L. Hancock, pages 29 to 30, BYU Library. Also They Knew the Prophet, Hiram Andrus, page 104. There are some who would seek to justify a compromise by quoting from early church history or some of Joseph Smith's statements in regard to plural marriage. It is true that early editions of the Doctrine and Covenants contained a statement against plural marriage, which was written by Oliver Cowdery. Joseph Smith also stated in 1838 that the Mormons did not believe in more wives than one. DHC 328. Other similar statements were made and published, but these seeming denials were issued as a response for the general body of the Church. There were a few individuals who believed and advocated the doctrine of plural marriage, and Joseph was one of them. However, he never openly advocated that doctrine, and at one time explained that it is not always wise to relate all the truth. Even Jesus, the Son of God, had to refrain from doing so, and had to restrain his feelings many times for the safety of himself and his followers, and had to conceal the righteous purposes of his heart in relation to many things pertaining to his Father's kingdom. TPJS, page 392. Joseph always declared that I never told you I was perfect, but there is no error in the revelations which I have taught. This should give men their foundation and defense. Joseph knew they would kill him if he lived the law of plural marriage, but he said, "But we have got to observe it. It is an eternal principle." Close quote. Men should be very careful concerning the oaths or the pledges they enter into. Once they have taken the oath and covenant of the priesthood, they should never seek justifications or excuses from obeying God's laws. The prophet gave his life for those covenants. Men who bear the priesthood of God should be willing to do the same.